Thanks everybody for joining today as we're going to talk about some of the lessons that we've learned as we've taken this journey through network streaming telemetry. My name is Bill Craver. I'm the Vice President of Global Systems Engineering here at SevOne. I'm also joined by Steve Plotkin, who is one of our global senior architects at SevOne, who has a lot of field experience in working with our customers as we've helped them with this journey of network streaming telemetry. You know, before we really get into this, I mean, it's been an interesting ride. It's definitely been a journey. I feel like, Steve, we've been doing this for what, about 5 years now,
Yes,
working with some of our partners, Juniper and Cisco, and we know Arista and a few others have been working on this. And I remember we started doing some initial work, you know, out of a team built out of our organization from the office of the CTO. It's been an interesting ride to see the journey and all the different versions that have changed. But as we go through this, you know, definitely been lined with a lot of different questions, right? You know, customers have always been asking, well, are my devices really ready? You know, is 5 minutes SNMP okay? I've always wanted more, but do I really need more? Can I live with it? How do I transition? How do I get to that hybrid role? Right? You know, one of the things is, you know, there's a lot more data that's available. How do I know what's available and filter them out? You know, Steve, what are some of the things that you're seeing now that these vendors are now supplying that's outside of the SNMP world today?
so what we're finding is that customers are trying to get into the streaming telemetry based off of changing some of the loads, picking up more data, doing additional analytics that will help them be more proactive in their environments for scaling and monitoring.
Yes,
So
there's a lot more things that are available to them, right? So then it's trying to figure out how do they know what they want, right? And we're going to address this a little bit more as we go through. One of the other big areas of concern is, you know, if you're used to 5-minute polling and now you get data every 1 second as it happens in real time, or maybe even more granular, that's almost 300 times the amount of data. What do I do? How do I store this? How do I tune those knobs, right? And what do I do differently with this data? So these are some of the questions that we're hearing from a lot of our customers and prospects as we talk to them about this journey. So that's one thing to have all the technical questions, but really the next thing is, you know, what are some of the business reasons and technical drivers that you might be considering to move to this new streaming, you know, this new streaming world as we get there, right? Steve, we've been hearing, how long have we been hearing SNMP is dead for, Steve?
this has been going on for many, many years now, although the problem is the making the change. It's learning a new environment, new languages, and what do I do with all of that data? How do I get to my zero latency, and how do I improve the value that I'm putting into my environments?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. And so it's, you know, getting the value, but I think for the first time, since we've been hearing SNMP is dead, right? The world is finally changing and we're starting to see the value that telemetry can provide. You know, so some of the drivers that we're hearing around this are, you know, service level agreements, right? I want tighter agreements and how do I understand on those services, right? How do I deal with get rid of my legacy stuff in my network and compare this to it? One of the big things that I'm hearing, Steve, and maybe you want to share a story or two if you have one, not to put you on the spot, but you know, faster thresholds, better response time. If we're going from 5 minutes down to 1 second, what are some of the things that our customers are looking to do with this faster data?
So that's an interesting question. So what we're finding is that customers have been putting in more and more hardware to deal with the issues of trying to get to more important data. And with the proverbial 5-minute or SNMP based polling, what's happening is that they can only reach certain amount of data. And what's the transformation is they're producing so much extra load on their devices that they're now having to add more devices. Streaming telemetry will take that load off of their devices, provide them the more granular data to provide them with the analytics that they're looking for, not only from a support perspective, but also from a business perspective, as we're getting into more zero latency type environments, so that they can now do anomaly detections, which happen between the smoothing intervals of SNMP. And so you're able to see these events much more clearer, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a great point. I definitely want to learn more about this smoothing. I think we have we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. It's definitely something that that we see. You know, even in the SNMP world, right? A lot of our customers say, you know, we want to go as fast as possible, and they just drop down to 1 minute polling, as you mentioned, the overhead that it adds to those devices, as well
Mhm.
as the overhead that it adds to and storage to take that granular data. One of the things that we don't really have here on the slide, Steve, and again I'm going to put you on the spot, is we hear about I can do better capacity planning if I have more granular data. Is this something that you're seeing your customers look for as well, besides that microburst data?
Yeah, so the business aspect of the telemetry data, because we're taking on more and more of the indicators and the metrics that are available within the models, we're then able to do a lot more analytics on seasonality to do some availability and scalability from the business perspective. Do I need all of this? Do I need to make adjustments to our environment? Are we actually utilizing all of this bandwidth? So what we've done historically is we've put in so much extra pipes and supportability and links to make sure that we weren't running out, that we tend to lose track of, are they being fully utilized? And with the granularity that we're able to provide, we're able to now see, are they actually being as utilized as SNMP is delivering to me?
Yeah, all great points and great reasons why our customers are starting to look forward to this technology. Um, and so, as we said, it's been a journey, and we've been working with some of our partners for a long time, and it really comes down to the overall vendor support as they go through. And we've definitely seen, key vendors are leading the way, such, examples here, Cisco and Juniper. And they've kind of each built them in their own way through this journey. And we're going to, again, dive deeper into that, because I think that's an interesting thing about the journey, that it's always like new technology. If you don't have standards in place, it's what do I do with this data? How do I support this data? And we're starting to see some standards emerge now that makes it easier for our customers to digest this data. The other thing, and we saw in one of the earlier challenges, was how do I deal with this in a hybrid world? Am I going to turn everything over at once? Can I have a hybrid world where I have some polling and some streaming? What's that going to look like? Steve, maybe walk through some examples of what you're hearing from some of the customers, and the concerns and ways that we, possible ways to support this.
So that's great. Well, so customers are very concerned about being able to receive both SNMP data, streaming telemetry, without losing their environment, their process, their alerting mechanism. So what we're seeing is, can we have this hybrid environment, and how will that look like to us? And so what we're able to do at SevOne is, that same device that's been doing all of that SNMP polling, that now can support, based on their operating system telemetry, we can then have and receive, and I'm just going to be clear here, we receive the data, we don't poll for it anymore in telemetry, is we can receive it under the same device information, so that when you look at the device, you'll see both indicators as you're transitioning away from SNMP, so that your environments can be in a fully hybrid environment as you're making this journey to a telemetry-based environment.
Yeah, all great points again, Steve. Obviously you've been working really close with some of our customers through this journey. The one thing that comes to mind too, that I don't know if we hit upon, it's, I think you hit the nail on the head, is how am I going to help with the transition of those devices?
Mm-hmm.
What about my network infrastructure that doesn't support streaming yet? I need to still view that data side by side with those other devices, that is. And I think that's one thing that, as you mentioned, we can still help with, right? We can still poll those devices while we're receiving those devices that stream, and still present that data side by side in a nice contextual manner.
Correct. So we're able to, at SevOne, our solution will present the information and report on the information side by side. So we're not looking at implementing a completely separate telemetry-based product. We have now a complete solution that will give you the same baselines and information that we have been providing for so many years now, side by side with the SNMP data. So from an operating perspective, nothing really changes. You have the same style reports, the same style receiving the data, looking at the data. So when you're having your SNMP and telemetry data, you can then look at it side by side, build your policies with having those side by side, and then looking at the value of looking the raw data coming in faster and more granularity than in the SNMP world. And then you start to see the differences that you have been missing so long.
Right. Yeah, good points. And the one thing too that we're starting to see on top of that is we have more granular data in conjunction with the SNMP data. So we're seeing some of the micro spikes. So one of the things here is, how do customers represent it, right? So I might ask you to drill down a little bit deeper to this, but I think this is a very clear view of the top part in blue coming from streaming at 1 second rates versus SNMP pulled at 5-minute rates. Why would customers care? What's the difference, and why do I see such huge spikes versus a smoothing?
So this is actually what I call my money slide, because what this is showing right here on the screen is the value that telemetry brings to the environment versus the historical or legacy of SNMP. And although SNMP is not going away tomorrow, I just wanted to show you that on your critical areas that you'll be able to see the microburst. So what you see on the screen is the orange, which 5-minute intervals to present to on any tool needs to have a smoothing interval just so that it maps out the graph legibly. And what you're seeing is when telemetry is being received and has been being received at, let's say, 5-second intervals, what happens there is there is no real smoothing interval because it's coming in so granular, so high frequency in the cardinality. So you're able to see the actual bursts between the 5-minute intervals. And what you're seeing is the anomalies that occur in the environment that kind of get skipped by SNMP. So you can see where SNMP is showing me about a 5 kilobit spike, but what actually is a 50 kilobit spike almost that really has an effect on your business. Yeah. So you can see the anomaly. This is also when you look at this high frequency data using analytics that now are more along the lines of data science analytics and machine. You're seeing that I can then look at this data more accurately from a seasonality perspective is one of the types of reports that we now are able to generate more effectively with telemetry, because what you see now is, okay, those spikes now become over the course of a greater time, but I have that much more data to analyze. So less smoothing, less guesswork, because this is where you get into that intermittent type solution that bogs any network professional, where I'm not necessarily picking it up in my 5-minute intervals, but definitely would be picking it up in 10-second intervals.
Yeah, all good points, right? And this really, you can see how this addresses some of those business cases that we were talking about, with finer data available for capacity planning, for troubleshooting, all those things that our customers are looking for.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So as we go through, right, we mentioned we're here to kind of support and help our customers. And, it's been a journey. One of the things that we mentioned, we're ready now. We can help with our customers through those lab trials, because most customers aren't really in production. They want to just work in the lab, and how is this going to help them? But before we get close to our conclusion here, really want to hit on some of the key things that have happened across this journey. As we mentioned, each vendor had their own way of sending data out via streaming. And what we saw was the first couple of iterations were using gRPC. Steve, help me understand a little bit about, first off, just for my benefit, maybe some people on the line here, what is gRPC, and why was it so difficult for us to manage all the constant changes that we saw?
So, okay, so that's great questions there, Bill. So early on, we were using dial out capabilities that were put into the devices that would send the data to us from the device, but we required all of this information to be configured at each individual device. Quite extensive, quite an effort. So what happened was, as the technology was improving, we started to move towards a more standard horizontal-based solution that could be adopted by many vendors. And so we went with the gRPC, which is the remote procedure call that allows us to make the connection to the device. And in our case, we have a specific collector that makes that connection. And then we embraced, which is the GNMI, which is the Google Network Management Interface to ties into gRPC, which is standard across all of the vendors.
Hey, that's
and
great.
Then with that, we're able to produce all of the data.
Yeah, no, that's great, right? So I think it's a little bit about the history about, what we've seen over the past couple of years, and you've already mentioned a little bit about GNMI. So as we kind of move forward, right, let's talk a little bit more, Steve, about why this change to GNMI is beneficial to customers to make it easier to consume the data. And we didn't really quite touch on open config and the Yang model, but maybe talk to us here a little bit about the benefits for this new model.
So the benefits of this model is we're able to make this connection, and then we're able to resolve the open config and Yang models, which are analogous to what would be MIBs and OID values in the legacy systems. And so with open config and Yang models, which are have much more depth to the data that we can collect, we can then resolve that data to that device, and then receive that data in the sample intervals down to seconds. So using this open config and Yang models allows us to get to that granularity, support all vendors that support basically GNMI and gRPC. So it's horizontal. It's not a unique per device type environment.
And talk to me a little bit about, right, how, we mentioned earlier on, one of the challenges, now we have all these different sensor groups. How do I know what I want? How do I know what's available to me? Talk a little bit about what SevOne's doing to make it easier for our customers to get this data.
That's another excellent situation. So open config and Yang is, as I described, is almost like another language that we deal with, unlike MIB and MIB devices. So what happens with us at SevOne is that we're building best practices and evaluating the value that we get from the different Yang models and the different open config files that we have in the devices, so that we can bring those values to our customers without having to have them go through the iterative task of testing each one for value. So we assess them, we tell them that these are duplicates, but one may be carrier-based, one may be enterprise-based, and the value that we bring is we have evaluated those models.
Yeah, which is really good because it really helps with a couple of things, right? It helps with the overall admin, it helps with the time to deployment, and as they maybe new sensors come out, we might make them available just through the UI to help them understand what might be available to them that they can subscribe to, right? Because it's more of a subscription base at this point in time, right?
Correct. It's subscription based because you set it up, you resolve the Yang model, which has to be supported by the iOS version that you're running. So there are many pieces to the solution from the vendors, and what we do is bring them the time to value quicker than they would on their own. And we also show them some of the utilities that we use to define those.
All right, that's awesome. As we kind of close out here, just the one thing I want us to close on, Steve, is, we've talked a little bit about the journey. We're ready for the journey with our customers to help them no matter what stage they're in. Talk a little bit about the architecture and how we deploy our collectors to help them out.
Okay, so real quickly is that you have your telemetry-based device that has a gRPC setting within the device. We have a SevOne collector that gets connected to that device via a gRPC call, and then our UI that's in our collector can be set up to configure the sensor paths, which are what is defined by the Yang models and the open config models, and the subscription to that device. So there don't have to be a one-to-many configuration. It can be many-to-many type Yang models to different devices, but all controlled from one UI.
Yeah, that's awesome. Again, trying to make it as easy as possible for our customers. You know, Steve, I think we're running out of time here. We're coming to the end of our session. I just want to say it was great chatting with you. You know, for us to get to share our journey that we're experiencing, and you're on the front line, so you know way better than I do, and I appreciate all your insights, and hopefully gain some, everyone else gain some insights from it. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up the session here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.